All right, so this is going to be a grading session for your assignment 6. And what we are looking for, or assignment 16, and what I'm looking for is stuff that I communicated to you guys during the demo in class and also the demo I posted online on this guy right here. It's a digital sketch using Sketchbook Pro, and the style of sketching that we were trying to use is sort of a 3D thumbnail explanatory sketch. Yes, there are color and value to communicate form, but we're not going super deep on the render quality. Mostly just looking for clear, clean communication of your ideas. I'm also going to be looking for whether you followed my tips to setting up one of these drawings, what your under sketch looked like, and again to show you what that is like on this. I'm going to be looking for these layers. Looking for your under sketch, first and foremost. Then I'm going to see if you have line work on top of your under sketch somewhere following that perspective. After that, I'm going to see if you've blocked in your color, how you added your shadows, and if there's a consistent light source that's apparent, how you added your highlights, and chosen a light source that sort of elaborates or accentuates on different areas on your thumbnail to communicate its form. And that's pretty much all I'm looking for. If you added some sort of drop shadow or vignette, that's great too. And I am not going to be looking specifically for some of the like little edge highlights you might see or little hot spots, but if you added that stuff, I will call it out. So let me close this file, and I'm going to dive into the files that you guys submitted for your lesson 16. And I'm going to go through each one of these in just a couple minutes and kind of pull out things so you guys have a chance to hear my feedback. So all of these I'm opening up in Sketchbook. And this would be Gabby's first file. Oh man, it's going to open all that every single time. So right off the bat, I see 3 different views here for this concept, and it looks like I've got a hand for scale. That's really nice. It looks like my thumb might be able to be used to push this thing, I don't know, off center. That might be kind of a cool place to put, and actually one nice thing about digital sketching is I can kind of draw on top of your work. Might have been a nice place to put an arrow here showing what's happening. This is a nice sort of glamour shot of whatever this object is, and this looks like it might be telling me about like magnets or something. Is this a section view? If it is, it might actually be helpful to kind of show me what the section looks like, or yeah, show me some sort of internal detail that I'm not really getting from your other sketches. A few notes here might be nice about like the material or like the finish. And overall, it'd be nice to have a like concept title, so I know what I'm looking at. Nice effective color blocking, and I can tell that your light source is coming from one side. Your shadow looks like your core shadow is like right about here on all these objects, which is pretty consistent. And I do like to see this reflected light coming around the back side. That looks nice. It's possible that like a little cast shadow underneath here would help it seem like this object is beneath this other object, but that's getting a little bit picky maybe. So, all right, nice first job. The line weight here is maybe just a little bit heavy too. But overall, great first sketch here in Sketchbook Pro. Let's go to your next file, Gabby. All right. Oh, okay, I remember. This is the Rubik's Cube group. You guys are working on some Happy Meal toys for your studio project. Let's see. I'm going to use my space bar and scoot this over where I can see it. All right, cool. These words. Clap. I like these little gestures here. Kind of tell me what's going on. Maybe the hat is snapping back together, maybe? That might be worth putting a note here, like hat snaps together. Yeah, something like that. Nice hand for scale. Again, this looks like maybe some sort of section view or technical view. I would label that and maybe call out what it is these are supposed to be. Oh, I'm not drawing on top of your layers here. Like, what are we looking at inside here? Let's see a note about that. I'm going to dive into some of your layers here. It looks like you have a bunch of different layers, and that's fine. It might be nice to, wow, okay, there's group 1. I see you sort of grouped per view. That's kind of nice because you can move things around. There's your undersketch, looking at the geometry. Good, I like to see that. Your perspective does look really good. And overall, I think the light looks pretty good too. Your cast shadow underneath this hat, I see it looks like you kind of put it in, but that whole area could be a little bit darker and actually give you an idea. I might use this like fancy design brush and like a medium gray on a multiply layer and just fill that in with a little bit of shadow, kind of make that area seem like it's underneath this hat a little bit more. Yeah, I might use the line weight. That is just a little bit, maybe just a little bit less thick on some of these. It's starting to look maybe just a little bit heavy, but overall, again, another good first couple sketches in the digital space. Let's see. Going on to Gabby's third sketch. Ooh, this is cool. This page already has a very different feel to it. The Flexi Robot, I like seeing the title in here. Nice. And it looks like, oh, that's neat. So there's your line work. And you've got, looks like that's shadow. And maybe some details too. Okay, and I see your color blocking, that's nice too. There's Flexi Robot, and your highlights. So, in this view, it looks like maybe the shadows aren't quite as consistent on like one side or another, but your highlights are pretty consistently on the top of each of these like shiny components, and it's still reading pretty well. I assume that this concept page maybe goes with another concept page, and these features kind of look like the kind of slot that would allow this leg to like pull out and rotate sideways. It might be kind of cool to illustrate that with a couple of these arrows and even say like legs connected with a rope for articulation or something like that. If I were going to do shadows on one of these guys, let me try that really quick too. Where are your highlights? They're on some other layer. They're on this layer too. Okay. I'm just going to start a new layer, making a multiply. Go to sort of like a medium gray and my fancy design brush, and I'm going to say, it looks like your light is kind of coming from the top and slightly from the front. That's light. So dark side might be over here. For this level of sketching, we're not worried so much about airbrushing, but it might be nice to add some shadow to the away side of all of these different objects, the away and underside of all these components, I guess. of course, you can go back through and erase away spots you don't like. You double that up a little bit. I just duplicated that layer. That might add just a little bit more dimensionality and get these things to pop off the page. On one of these flatter versions, if these components are still round and it looks like your light is still coming mostly from the top, maybe make sure it's coming slightly from the side too, because then you could add shadow to the bottom of all of these rounded objects. Little cast shadow on the side there. Right, it would be cast shadow underneath there. It would cast on this side. His face looks pretty round. I'm not sure if you get shadow on the inside of that object. It might help me, the viewer, see if this is supposed to be, you know, part of the same surface or something slightly different. Yeah. Anyway, that's my one little critique there. Line work is looking a little bit less muddy here. I bet you this is the third page you did. So, all right, nice job, Gabby. We're going to go on to another person, Kennedy. Actually, you know what? I'm going to grab a paper and pencil here to jot down some grades as I go. I'm not going to say this stuff out loud for your guys' privacy. I do want to make a note so that I don't forget later. Shuffling through some paper. Okay, on to Kennedy's stuff. All right, Kennedy. First thing off the bat, remember that these page compositions, maybe not all of the viewers are going to be familiar with what it is that you've put on the page. So give your page a title somewhere. A descriptive title about what we're looking at on the page. Let's take a look at your layers now. So looks like that was sort of a outline sketch. That's a good way to go. Added some layers on top of it, cleaning up the lines a little bit. That's good too. And it looks like maybe you did more lines on another layer here too, because these are slightly different. I'm happy to see that you're sort of working through these layers and improving your composition as you go. That's nice. It does look like your pen has a very constant thickness. It doesn't really trail off like mine does. That's something you might want to look in the settings of your design pencil if that is the tool that you're using. And if it's the stock settings, you should have some nice change in line weight. If not, you can go under the Advanced tab and make sure that the size with heavy pressure and size with light pressure have some difference between them. That's going to help out giving you more, I guess, dynamic line work that isn't so all the same width. I can also tell that your lines are maybe wavering just a little bit. That always happened to me like when I was first learning this tool, because my pen really slides around on the screen more than I'm used to doing on paper. So, all right, nice first composition here. This might be another good chance to put in some notes about what it is we're looking at. Like, this is a rope that does something, and this is a material that has some sort of function. Okay, let's take a look at your next page. Move this over. You're part of the Slitherio team. And it looks like, yep, you've got an undersketch there, an oversketch, and actually kind of leaving it in there sort of halfway opaque is helping communicate right now. It looks like maybe you didn't have enough time to finish this one. But again, I like that there's sort of a shared set of views between your last concept and this one. Again, it might be nice to throw a title on here for your page. What is the name of this concept? I like that you're starting to put a hand in here for scale. For all objects that are held by fingers, it's nice to have a finger in there for scale. That's cool. If you can't figure out what your hand should look like, it's always a good way to use this tool. Like, take a photo of someone's hand in this position, and then you can just trace over it. So I'm not going to talk too much about this one because it looks like you didn't have a chance to finish. Let's go to another. And it looks like maybe I only got 2 from Kennedy, so we'll move on to Amber. Okay. Amber, you must be a part of the Minecraft team. Oh, these are fun. Okay, like I was saying to the other 2 people we've already looked at, give your page a title, give your concept a title. You might even use a thicker marker or something to emphasize the title a little bit, but that's an important thing here. Anytime you have an arrow, it's probably a good indication that you want to make some sort of note, like sword hides inside band, or something like that, just to explain what is going on in this view. I like that you have a hand in here for scale. The shading on this one got maybe a little bit muddy, especially with the shadow around back. It maybe didn't need this shadow around the backside. You could probably get away with just some light lines to actually draw this hand in the first place, just to sort of hint at that's what's going on, without spending as much time shading all of this stuff in here. These look really nice. This shading style around the back here is really efficient. I see you didn't have to spend a ton of time with a bunch of highlights and things. This communicates pretty well that this band is a round shape. I'm not sure. It looks like you were trying out some gray lines as opposed to black lines. That's fine too. It does make it look maybe a little bit less like a sketch, and you probably could go back in here and because this is probably one of those ideas that is not a final concept, you want it to read like it's still a sketch. At least that's kind of how we were talking about this assignment. You could go in here with one of these ellipse templates and add some sketch weight back into your drawing a little bit, and it might help it communicate a little bit more like it's a sketch. I don't always like to use these tracing templates in a sketch of this level, but sometimes, as you guys know, the ellipses can be a little bit tricky, and it's a good way to not waste a bunch of time doing a bunch of undo and redos. That might be enough to sort of emphasize the front of this with the creeper on it. You might even say creeper on the front and Minecraft sword on the back. Alright, let's take a look at the next one. Alright, let me zoom out just a little bit here. It looks like we're seeing front views of your bracelet. That might be another thing to call out. This is your title. And if this page is all about front views, might even say front view exploration. It's important to give your pages a title that tells anyone who's looking at this page exactly what they're looking at. It just helps frame your drawings. It's kind of cool to see that you have like one of these slightly more in the foreground, one of these slightly more in the background, but they have a shared perspective along with this one too. That's awesome. I have a feeling like the width here with this object this far away from the viewer, if that's the correct width, that this width here probably needs to be a little bit wider to accommodate. Like if you scaled this object up, it would be quite a bit wider in this view. I think the glow around the edge of your object here is maybe a little distracting. It also looks like maybe you spent some time looking at the back here. Let's hide it. Oh yeah, okay. Let's try something else. Instead, if we, because you have like really light lines, let's try something. If we had just put let's try just a vignette behind all three of these objects. Give me like a nice straight line here. I'm actually going to move this layer all the way to the back. I have all of my silly notes on top of this also, so this might not, it still look a little funny. Alright, let's do, nice dark color behind everything here. And then I overshot, so I can actually come back with my eraser in the same guideline. And oops, make this like a whole bunch bigger. That's better. Erase away. And my graphics card seems like it's working pretty hard right now. But do that by hand. It's a vignette, it doesn't have to be perfect. And then I have a feeling if you really wanted to pop this off the page more, because the band behind here wouldn't be so vignetted, you could say it was in shadow. You know what, that alone I think maybe is a little bit less distracting than what you had with like the crazy highlight around the outside too. If you add extra details to emphasize something, try not to spend too much time or go too overboard. A lot of times just the basic sketch is enough to communicate your idea. Alright, let's look at the third one that you have. Okay, ooh cool, some iterations on, oh wait, no, this is the reference. That's right, part of this assignment was to draw several objects from an existing brand. In this case, it looks like Jawbone. And I kind of wonder, cool. Alright. Some nice shared perspective here. I kind of wonder if you like set it up once and copy pasted. Maybe, maybe not. One thing that maybe you could do, once you build one of these objects, and let's move that object around. I feel like I'm missing a tool up here. Hold on. Okay. So you could actually copy this layer. And it looks like maybe you did for that one. Yeah. Nice. You can copy it, paste it, and then kind of do a different shading around the outside to give it a different look. This rendering style, I think, maybe went a little bit beyond what I demoed. I see a lot of pretty nice airbrushing, actually, and that's fine. But I encourage you guys to try and see if you can achieve the same level of communication with a little bit less high fidelity rendering. Spend a little bit less time on it, at least for this type of sketch. There's a time when you want to spend a lot of extra effort making sure every single one of these highlights is communicating in a way that's more lifelike. But overall, yeah, this looks pretty good. It would be nice to see maybe a little bit more difference between like the inside and the outside of the object. I'm not sure where the light source on these is coming from. Clearly there are several light sources, but I think maybe some more dramatic lighting might help communicate, or maybe just make more dramatic what's going on. So let's try something really quick. I'm going to use my airbrush on a multiply layer, knock it down quite a bit. You know what, not airbrush, because I was talking about not using airbrush. And I'm still on a multiply layer. I'm going to pick a color that's not quite as dark. Let's see if we can bring out the difference of inside and outside a little bit more. With just some simple cell shading, meaning not airbrush. I might actually make that a little bit darker and choose a slightly darker gray. I mean, even that, I think, helps show that there's an inside and an outside to this object a little bit better. Of course, you can come back in and add a little bit more bounced light around the back of the object. But if we're going for an efficiency of communication in this style drawing, I think that's maybe about all you would need. So another thing that would be nice to see are some notes about like how these patterns translate, but this is an existing thing. So nice job, Amber. All right. How are we doing on time? I might have to speed these up just a little bit. I want to give everyone some individual feedback, but at the same time not make this video like a 2-hour video. Okay. Now we're looking at Casey. Casey's drawings here. I'm looking at the Happy Meal box and a couple tools. I think this is the Home Depot group. Once again, it'd be nice to have a title somewhere. You could even say like Home Depot brand Happy Meal or something like that. These might be nice to have a couple notes about, like I can't spell hammer apparently. Hammer, wrench, this is the box. I guess that's true. You might say something about how like this is some kind of plastic and like maybe textured for grip. I mean, there are a few things that maybe you could add notes about in this view. Let's take a look at your layer structure. It looks like I'm not really seeing any hidden layers. There's no real under sketch here. I think your perspective would benefit from that. So if we take a look really quick at perspective here, it looks like that line, and because we don't really have a line up here, these guys are not really converging that much. And then these lines, if you follow them back, are also kind of orthographic. I think had you done an undersketch, you could have evaluated this perspective a little bit more and maybe chosen a perspective that was a little bit more dynamic. Maybe have these lines come in just a little bit more and give yourself a box that is just a little bit more dynamic in shape. Just something to think about as you move on to this stuff. Nice color blocking, really simple shadow on one side I see here, and really simple highlights. I think your highlights you could probably do just as wide as your lowlights here. And one little thing I noticed, maybe you could do, let's see if I can find your highlight layer. It looks like if this is a wrench, like the inside of the wrench would probably have a little bit of a shadow here, and then this side would probably have a little bit of a highlight there. And then of course, that kind of thing you might want to still try and pay attention to. But overall, pretty efficient. Let's take a look at the next one. All right, it looks like this is a workbench for the Home Depot thing. Looks like this is a cool detail shot, especially when something is like cropped out. Sometimes I like to put it in its own circle, and you can kind of mask away the rest of it. I'm not going to dig in and find out what layer it's on. I'm just going to fake it in with the white thing here, and then you could actually label this as like a, oops, not in white. You can actually label it as a detail view, or like edge detail view. That's kind of neat, and you could even like say, yeah, that's what we're looking at. Same thing about your perspective here. It looks like we're doing something very orthographic. Try some other more convergent perspective here to just make things feel a little more dynamic. I like your shading here. It's very efficient. Nice job with that. And it looks like maybe we're missing a view down here too of something else, maybe a section view or a hand. Again, it would be nice to see a title on this page. Let's check out one of these other ones. And Casey's third page is a leaf blower. It looks like some kind of blower. Drawing an existing object using a VBL that exists from somewhere in Home Depot. So again, it might be nice to like throw the Home Depot in here as reference for what the brand is supposed to be. You could even say like VBL analysis. That'd be kind of nice. All right, this guy, it looks like you've got your shadows pretty nice. This looks like a cast shadow coming down the top from your handle. Great job with that. I'm going to try something else for your highlights. So for your highlights, I'm going to still use that, like, I'm going to use a dream brush, not a really skinny brush. Pick a nice white color and then turn the opacity on my layer down just a bit. And I'm going to kind of do the opposite of what you were doing with the shadows as a highlight. So it looks like your light's coming mostly from the top. So I'm going to try and keep my highlights mostly on the top and just add them on each part sort of individually. Erase away the areas that I don't really need. I guess you wouldn't really see that much on top here unless this is round, but that might be enough to kind of communicate what it is we're going for. I guess we'd probably see some around the back here, like that. I think that works maybe just a little bit better at showing that there's a nice round transition here as opposed to these. It looks like you're trying to do some edge highlights. Edge highlights are great, but we want some volumetric highlights on these sort of like 3D thumbnail sketches as well. I think this is hollow. So one thing you might be able to do with that too is add a highlight to like the inside on the bottom. Find my brush. Something like that. So it looks like, you know, where the light's hitting the bottom of the inside of this and the top of the outside. If you wanted to make it seem like it was starting to disappear inside there, you can kind of fade out the edge of that just a little bit. Again, we're not doing a ton of airbrushing on this guy, but I think that would help a little bit more. Your lines also look like they're kind of all the same thickness. Try and use this, pick a brush tool that gives you some thickness variation, like this design pencil. I think it'll make your lines seem a little less overworked. And yeah, other than that, it's a good first shot here too. I don't see any like underlying geometry on this. I think that's another thing that maybe this object could have benefited from, was sketching out, you know, the overall shape first, trying to get a feel for what that's supposed to look like. If there's an offset, maybe you could actually draw that in, kind of feel out what the geometry is supposed to do, and make sure everything is still really in perspective, so that by the time you sketch it, you're not guessing for the first time. You can kind of trace over some of these elements and get your lines to work the way you want them to. All right. Let's see. I forgot to jot down. We looked at Amber. And now we're looking at Casey. Looks like you didn't really have a chance to finish all of your pages, Casey. And all right, so who is next? Open. Carly. All right, Carly, right off the bat, I see a title for your page. Very good. I see some notes. This is exactly the kind of notes I was looking for. Rounded corners, some of them are rounded, some of them are not. Same shape. Yeah, this is perfect. I like seeing these kinds of notes. It helps me, the viewer, really be able to tell what you, the person who is dissecting Muji's brand, what was going through your head when you drew these objects. It's nice. This is maybe a little bit hard to see. You could always do a little like call out to that section and then write, 15% brown wood or whatever it is. Because this is digital, you might also like to, let's see if I can do this. I'm just going to combine a bunch of your stuff really quick. Combine all these layers, merge them together. You can use this little guy to cut out portions of your drawing and actually like make some of them bigger. Make this guy bigger too. Kind of fill out your page just a little bit more with the assets that you already have, or even reposition them. Maybe it makes sense for this to be up here, and I can move Muji down to the bottom or something like that. It's up to you, but you have more tools at your disposal to like fill the page. These seem to be sitting on an edge. Sometimes it's nice to get, oops, I'm not using a tool. Let me get out of that. To use put a nice straight edge underneath them so it looks like they're sitting on something. But nice shading on this stuff too. Looks like a little bit of airbrush, but everything looks pretty correct. All right, let's go to the next one. There we go. Alright, so it looks like probably a Rubik's Cube thing, and maybe didn't quite have time to finish this one. So we're going to go on to the next. There we go. Okay, so this one looks complete. Other than, it looks like maybe all the layers got merged. No, this is a PNG, not a Photoshop file. So maybe it just exported as the wrong thing. I would have liked to see all your layers. That aside, some things I can call out that I really like. All right, so we're going to add a title. We might add some callouts. Those callouts you had on your Muji brand would have been great here too. Like, you could even say wind the handle and like pops open or something like that. This is a great example of a, yeah, that's perfect. This is a great call out detail view. Again, you might say like detail view of the worm gear, just so people know what we're looking at. And you could even say like this is internal mechanical view or something like that. Your shading looks very efficient. I can tell that there's your dark side, light's coming from the top on both of these views. That's really nice. Your inside here is nice and dark to match. And I see you're doing a few little edge highlights here too. That's fine. Usually when I do edge highlights, like edge highlights, I try to use a pencil tool as opposed to an airbrush. It makes things seem maybe just a little bit more crisp. Again, sort of beyond what we were trying to do in this, but figured I'd mention it. Your perspective, Casey, this is kind of what I was talking about. Carly kind of has this perspective that is really vanishing to a point that's a little bit more dynamic. These objects just seem to have a little bit more energy to them. That's a nice job. Also, these drop shadows really help anchor these objects onto the page somewhere. So overall, this is a great concept page and just about the right level of shading detail for this explanation. So good job. All right, just making some notes. Let's open the next one. Okay, we're on to Luke. Right off the bat, nice to see the title up top. That makes me happy. I also noticed that your file size might be a little bit small. Everyone else's have kind of had to zoom out. Yours have kind of had to zoom in. I'm just going to double check the image size here. Yeah, this is maybe a little too small. I would try and do 11 by 17, so 17 inches wide, 11 inches tall at 150 DPI, just so I have more pixels to play with later on if I need to change something. Cool. All right, hands for scale, awesome. They look great. The right amount of shading on the hands. This is a really neat way to show that you're like carving out this object from sand. This little detail view. This might be something too that you could put in a circle and kind of show us where that detail comes from. But overall, yeah, this is a really great concept page. It'd be nice to maybe see some of those, just like Carly was doing, like cast shadows underneath these objects to help anchor them on the page. Or you could even have just a shared horizon line behind these guys as if they were on a table. Just for composition, I think that might be kind of nice. And then notes would be great too, like fully excavated pieces, right? Something like that, or excavate with shovel. That'd be great. But this overall as a concept page and your sketch style looks really good. So nice job with that. It looks like, yep, there's our line work, our color blocking. Cool. I would have liked to see that under sketch too. I see that you've got some shadow going. I don't really see any highlights. If I were going to add highlights, let me just show you really quick. Again, I'm going to use a white design brush on a new layer that's not all the way opaque, and just add some highlights to maybe the top of some of these if my main light source is from the top. Again, we're using sort of a cartoony rendering style for these sketches. Right, you get the idea, but it will help add just a little bit more contrast to your drawings and communicate their 3D form just a little bit more. If after you add these highlights they're a little bit much, you can always turn down the opacity on that layer. Okay, next one from Luke. Cool. This page is sort of a different aspect ratio. Again, double check that you're doing 11 by 17 at 150 ppi. Okay, we're gonna fix these. I'm gonna show you a different way to do those. Again, I like the title. It would be nice to have some callouts. Cool arrows here. I'm gonna zoom in just a little bit, and this one is interesting because it's sort of going from one view to the next and one view to the next. It'd be nice if all three of these objects, there we go in black, all three of these objects were more the same scale. They do kind of share a perspective, but I think that would help with this transition. Right now they're kind of randomly on the page. This arrow should probably be more like this. You want to make sure both ends of your arrow follow the same perspective. This one's a little bit closer, but I think would probably be more like this. You can see like this center should line up here, the center should line up here with that arrow. Try and keep your drawings on the page. You can always, if you see you're getting too close, move that over because this is digital. Alright, so if you wanted to add some drop shadows, I think Carly had a really effective way of doing that. You could do it maybe even more simply with just like a dark gray layer underneath everything else, and just do, oh man, that pen is really big. Just almost imagine that these objects are floating just a little bit above the page. It'll help them just be more grounded on the page, like a cast shadow. These guys too. Carly's outline on hers really helped make it feel like it was a part of the sketch too. So let's take a look at your next one. All right, taking a look at fossil brands. Once again, nice to see the title on here, or something that serves as the title. No hard edges, smooth surfaces. That's a good example of something you write in a note. Maybe move that a little bit more close to what it is you're calling out, and it'd be nice to have a couple notes for these guys too. All in all, I think maybe your shadows, again, are just a little distracting. They're a little bit muddy. Another good way for this kind of sketch to do shadows when you're not trying to make necessarily a very realistic cast shadow. You just want something to tie these all together. You've got a couple options. One, you could do, I guess my favorite little, just like floating ellipse shadow. They're all just floating in space. You could also do a vignette behind all of these guys. Oh, I'm holding shift right now to keep these lines nice and straight. It looks like there must be white on one of these other layers here. Yeah, there we go. Maybe I'll come back with a pencil and cap my vignette. Oh, and I put that on the wrong layer. Yeah, I'm going fast just as an example here. If I have a vignette behind an object and it's like these objects on this layer are kind of transparent, I can always put a layer in between and use a white brush to just kind of paint out behind each of these objects so that they look the right color in front of my vignette. Basically, they take the color of anything above this layer. This one looked fine. That's another way to kind of tie these objects together. That's a little bit more intentional. Overall, your two compositions, Luke, were really nice. Just would like to see a few more notes and maybe a little more thought in a pre-sketch on how you're laying out your page in terms of how the perspective works. But overall, pretty nice. All right, who is next? Looks like Lauren is next. Lauren, I think we looked at yours in class a little bit, but we'll include it here as well. So this looks like some three existing objects. Again, it'd be nice to have some sort of title, or if you're referring to an existing brand, oh man, put that somewhere on the page so we know what we're looking at. Keep that in like the bottom corner over here. Your cast shadows might be just a little bit heavy. If I can find that layer, yeah, here we go. I'd knock those back just a little bit. They're not the most important thing on the page. So you can kind of knock that down a little bit too. And your vignette is fine. I would try and keep these lines, especially because we're in digital space, keep those lines nice and straight. Yeah, we can just add. Again, I can use Shift key or one of the guides to make my lines like nice and straight, so I don't have to worry about it looking messy. Some things you can make an excuse for, but straight lines in a digital world, there are ways around it. Okay. Other than that, it looks like you're practicing some really loose sketch style, or like shading styles. That's great. These objects both work pretty well. Line work gets maybe a little lost up in the back here, but I'm just being nitpicky. This one, the outline around here is maybe a little too dark, and overall, it looks maybe just a little unconstructed. If you add maybe just a couple contours or something, it could help define some of these shapes a little bit more, and make it feel a little bit more intentional, so I can read what's happening on these surfaces here. I'm just guessing right now. Okay, let's take a look at your next one. zoom in. Double check that your pages are the right size. This also looks a little bit funky to me. I'm going to check out my image size here. Yeah, 15 by almost 8 at 100. Make sure you're doing 17, 11, and 150 ppi. So we're all sort of sketching it the same way. Okay, yes, there's a title. That's wonderful. I like these notes. Rubik's colors, because that's what you're pulling your colors from. It's not obvious to everyone. McDonald's logo, Rubik's logo, hat forms the top. Yeah, these are the kind of notes that I'd like to see on these sketches. Nice hint at how the hands work. Your shading here is exactly what I was looking for. Again, just really simple, cartoony cell shading to communicate how this object is supposed to look without spending a ton of time worrying about highlights and details. These, I think, really simply, you could do a couple things to really pull them out. One would be change your background color, and then maybe use a white brush to make these pop off the page just a little bit more. I know they're thumbnails. I appreciate that you're using just the simplest shading to communicate the value here, and I think your location on the shading is correct. But this might help them jump off the page a little bit more already. Or if you didn't want to do that, if you wanted to keep your background white, there you go. You could also choose like a really light gray color and make your objects gray. Yeah, it's just one tiny other little step that you could take to kind of differentiate those thumbnails from the background. Nice composition. All right, we're gonna open up your last one, Lauren. All right, same thing goes here. You know, gray background and keeping these white with like the simple shadow, I think would work just fine. The shadow location on these is maybe a little bit funny. Let me try again. So if I'm using just simple shading style and my light is coming from that direction, like probably these bottom faces would be in shadow. Oh, I gotta move this down below your line work here. Like that would be in shadow. These would all be in shadow here. And then probably, you know, the sides of these feet, you could keep those like it's a cast shadow here, and just come back in and take away at the areas that you don't want to keep. Another thing, because these are faceted objects, oops, I didn't want to get rid of all of that. Because they're faceted objects, it might make sense in this case to choose one other gray that's not quite as dark and include that as well, so you can really tell that these are objects, you know, multi-dimensional objects here. I mean, that might do it too. This looks really nice. I like that you're starting to do some edge detail highlights. We're going to get into more of that in the next demo. But I'm glad that you've attempted that a little bit too. Let's see. Yeah, your hand is good. This looks like it's supposed to be moving forward. Maybe an arrow there would communicate that as well. All right. Overall, I think this is a good explanation. So nice job, Lauren. next person, oops, let's open Cole. All right, someone's sketching some rigid tools. That's cool to see. It looks like maybe you merged all your layers or did everything on the same layer, so I'm unable to see if you did any like setup geometry or what your layers look like. It would be nice to have a title somewhere, and or maybe, you know, like the Home Depot or rigid logo somewhere worked into this composition, just so we know what we're looking at. And when you're analyzing a visual brand language, it's definitely important to call out the things that you notice, like orange color used as secondary. Maybe we see a color wheel on here with a breakdown. Tell me about the edge details. Tell me about texture differences between the grip and the stock. Tell me about different materials, if I didn't already say that. Those are all important things. It also looks like in this, things are looking kind of muddy. I would take another look at some of the examples, like the example I used when I was coloring a drone, to block in your colors and then try to shade your object, you know, as a whole with some of these more simple tools. I think it's going to help make these seem a little bit more clean. Another thing I noticed is that the tool you're using for sketching also doesn't have quite the same like high pressure, low pressure difference in width. As I press my pen, you know, I get a thick line or a thin line. These all seem to be sort of the same exact width, and it gives it a very Microsoft Paint feel. So see if you can mess around with one of these other tools and get something that looks a little more natural. Another thing with these ellipses, so that's sort of the axis your ellipses are following. When you line up your ellipse tool, you should try and match, see that axis that I can rotate, match the axis to the one that the ellipse is supposed to follow. Like this is a cylinder, I sort of drew out that center axis, and then when I draw the ellipse, that's actually the angle it should be following in this perspective. So like the back of this should actually look more like that. This guy should probably look, oops, kind of like that. All right, let's take a look at another page. Call number 2. Chamfered edge into a filleted edge is seen as the hammer handle. Okay, so these look like notes. These are, it's true that you can do some typing in Sketchbook Pro, and if you do, like this is my note text, I can kind of change the size of it to something that's readable on the page, and then I can actually move it around and try and put it in context to something else on the page. It'd be nice to see your brand that you're designing somewhere on the page too, and it looks like you maybe drew these objects small and scaled them up. One thing you'll notice if you scale things up too much is that the line weight, the thickness of the line, also scales up a lot. So like if I draw this little box, crappy little box on a page, and then I say, oh geez, hold on, let me undo that. And why aren't you letting me select something? I feel like there's a tool that I'm missing here. Hold on. Where? It's a toolbar. It's a quick transform. Not the lasso transform. Where is the lasso transform? Let's see. No. Hotkeys. No. Right, I just might have to find that somewhere else. Alright, so that thing. If I try and scale that up, see, my lines are going to get really thick. So anyway, try and sketch somewhere close to the size that you intend it to be on the page. And under sketch, like a general layout before you start rendering things, is going to help with that. Alright, let's open one of your other ones here. Alright, so this one looks like you got Home Depot dude, detailed close-up, actual size shown, next to floor layout. Okay, that's cool. That you could actually even write like actual size, or to scale with room size. And this one you can say like enlarge to show detail. To show detail. Oh, cool. That is kind of a neat way to show this. Happy Meal box can be customized and turned to a house workshop. That's neat. I think overall rendering style is just something maybe you need to try a couple other tools. Like I mentioned before, try and pick the design pencil tool. Like if we used even these like rough outlines that you have here as an underlay, you might be able to, in the next layer, actually refine your lines a little bit more and get something that's a little bit more just clean looking and closer to maybe the design that you're trying to shoot for here. One nice thing about Pencil Tool 2 is that you get these like softer beginnings and ends to your lines that I think help make a sketch feel just a little bit more like it was done on paper, which is sometimes really nice. And then block out your color. So if you know that this dude's apron is supposed to be orange, first thing I like to do is just fill the whole thing in orange. And don't worry about shading when you block in this color first. Just block in the entire thing orange. You can always erase away areas if you overshoot. I might make another layer underneath to do like his blue jeans. And now's a good time too, when you're blocking in color. If you see, oh man, his butt looks a little crunched, maybe you go back and fix the lines. There's an eyedropper tool, which is nice if you want to try and match a color that you've already picked. You can always go back, like I said, and erase any areas that you may have overshot. with an eraser tool. Let's pick another color for his boots. And I didn't add any lace details yet on his boots. I'm just trying to do this really quick. And some kind of skin color for his face, if that's what you want to use. Okay, so we've blocked in some color. I'm just going to merge all those color layers together. Next, create a multiply layer. Use some kind of like middle gray in my same like magical design brush tool and pick a light source. So for this guy, it might make sense for him to have light coming, again, mostly from the top, but kind of from this side. So I'm going to start by just darkening in areas on his body that are really going to stay in shadow. Like most of the side of his belly, probably in shadow. Most of the side of his leg is probably in shadow. Probably the inside of this leg is in shadow. Probably most of the side of his boot is in shadow. Definitely this boot will be in shadow. Underneath his neckline, under his chin, probably in shadow. Definitely underneath his hat, part of his nose. If it's too intense for you, you can always reduce the intensity by changing the opacity of this layer. And I might come back through and erase away some of the backside of these, so it seems like there's a little bit of reflected light coming around the back of his body. Okay, so I've basically painted in my core shadow, and then I'm going to do another layer to do my highlights. Pick a white color, change the opacity of my layer down, and kind of do the same thing, only where the light is really going to be hitting, like the top of his nose, the brim of his hat. Probably like the top of his arm here, the top of his arm here, maybe outside of his shoulder, definitely like the top of his belly. And that might be enough. I could do probably like the top of his boots here. Alright, and again, like pretty simply, I've sort of cartoon blocked in some shading on this very organic shape, just enough to make it feel like, you know, he has some definition. If you want to make it seem like these details are popping out too, you can use on that same white layer. You could actually add some highlights just to the edges of some of these details to make it seem like they're popping out of the surface. Like the top edge of this collar, probably have a little bit of detail. Maybe the top edge on his laces might have something like that too, or like the top edge of his boots, probably have a little highlight too. Anyway, I wanted to give you an idea of sort of what I was looking for there when I mean color blocking and stuff. Again, not really using airbrushing, mostly just like hard shading tools. Okay, overall, I see your ideas there. Just need some more work on keeping those lines not so wavy. Do an undersketch first to work out the kinks in your construction, and then worry about coloring stuff in. Okay, let me jot down. Cole has his stuff done. Alright, let's go to the next person. Alright, Dexter is up. Rubik's Cube. Alright, this file is looking like it's about the right size. It's good to see. I don't know why these buttons keep popping up. Okay, Dexter, make sure you add a title. You've got a spot for it even. Yeah, put it in. Or this can be like where Rubik's Cube, the brand goes, and you can put the title underneath. Add a label to your page. Your vignette could actually use a little bit of blocking, maybe, just to make it feel like it belongs in the space you're trying to put it in. It's kind of nice that it fades out. You might be able to do a more intentional fade. There is, if you just increase the size of your eraser by a lot, like you can go over and make the size gigantic, you can really like fade things away a lot more gradually. So for what it's worth, you can give that a shot. Overall, let's see, you've got, and it looks like you have some sort of underlay here. Yeah, trying to figure out your perspective. I like to see that. Because a lot of what you're drawing is a box, you can also probably get away with drawing just like the outside of the box, just to give you perspective you can follow once you start drawing the rest of the box, especially in these complex views where you have multiple like sections of a box lined up on top of each other. Probably worth working that out first if you didn't already. Let's see. Shading style on this is exactly what I was looking for. You could add some cast shadow in here if you wanted, just to make it seem like it has a little bit more depth. So show you what I'm talking about. See, it looks like your light is kind of coming mostly on the top and kind of from the front. This side, you could actually put in a cast shadow on the inside of these objects. And actually, if it's coming at an angle, oops. Make the back half of this thing might all be in shadow from the object above it. You can kind of do the same thing here too. And it might actually help make these feel like they're more stacked objects on this page here. It's probably more like that. Anyway. Again, just another quick shading style that might help add just a little bit more depth to that thumbnail here. I would like to see some notes like, hey, these are components that stack using a, I don't know, red thing to make joints. I really like seeing these views with the hands. Those could actually even be maybe a little bit bigger because I think that's kind of important. All right, let's see one of the other pages. All right, another Rubik's Cube concept. Again, title and notes would be great to see. This is a pretty cool view. Your perspective is pretty extreme, maybe a little bit too extreme. I know this is probably supposed to be a cube in here, but it's just getting really warped. This part looks really cool though. So it's a matter of just kind of finding the balance there. I like what you're doing with the corners. That's a nice arrow. These details are kind of cool. That might be something worth doing a vignette behind to kind of tie those things together, and then you can give it a label. These guys, again, if you're doing edge highlights for like a parting line or something, I would try using, instead of an airbrush, I would try using a shadow a little different now. I would try using just a pencil tool to add those highlights as opposed to the brush tool. Unless you're really trying to communicate that this is like a pillowy soft surface, it's I'm not sure it looks exactly how you intend it to look. Also, with white objects, this is another good reason for maybe using a background color that is slightly different to emphasize the white, because then you can actually paint those objects white and they will pop off the page a little bit more. Okay, and then your third page must be the brand analysis or practice, VBL practice page. Ooh, these are cool. Have a neat sketching style going on here. It would be nice again to have a title up at the top somewhere, or if you want to keep it centered, that's fine. Give me some call outs about like these edge details, or the fact that they're all like symmetrical. Like those are all like, oh, metallic blade with moving top piece shared among all three of these guys. Like there are a lot of things you could talk about when you're sketching these items out. The line work. It looks like you maybe actually tried using the mirroring tool. That's pretty cool. Yeah, nice. I also appreciate that you're kind of shading these as an entire object rather than worrying about each component separately. However, these little edge shadows, maybe, I'm not entirely sure what it is you're trying to communicate with those. If I were to shade one of these guys, I guess I could try really quick. Oops, I'll do this guy on a different layer. So let me make this a little bit bigger. I'm not sure if these are all the same color, like if all the components are exactly the same shade of gray or shade of black. It might be worth it to, in these sort of like thumbnail views, digital thumbnail views, since you're looking straight on at the object, to choose like one other color for one of the components. Like maybe this button on all of them is sort of the same, is white or some other color. Like sure, we'll pick that like ID orangey yellow color and just say, yeah, that's the color we want, just to differentiate what's going on with all of these guys. And then it would be the same here and here and then here and here. Kind of see how it translates from concept to concept. Okay, for shading, nice middle gray on a multiply layer, pick a light source and go to town. Might choose something that's a little bit bigger. I'm going to erase away the top here. Maybe come back in and add some on the side, like that. That might be all you need. You could do like white layer to do some highlights. Man, it feels a little bit glitchy right now. And this maybe is like a little bit more the top side of this object here. Maybe it does come down. Maybe it does come down a little bit, but not quite as far. I'm just trying to illustrate the overall feeling for this guy. Notice like it's a little bit, I probably shouldn't touch the edge here, so I can come back through. I'm gonna get rid of that, get rid of this right here. If you wanted to get one level of detail further, you probably wouldn't see the highlight under some of these, like these areas, and you might see a little bit more of the shadow under those areas. Excuse me. Okay, just another way to do it, I guess. Let's see, maybe this has some sort of like curve to it. I can accentuate with the shadow too, and do that. Okay, anyway. Just another way to kind of do it. Yeah, missing some notes on that page, but overall, nice compositions on your Rubik's Cube stuff. Okay, who's next? Opening up. Laura. Looks like we're doing some tractors. This is great for scale here. Awesome. Let me switch to a color that you guys can see. That's a great way to show scale. It'd be nice if that view moved into like here maybe, or even got a little bit larger. Axle assembly, that's cool to see. This might be better repositioned. Like if this view were up here, then you can more directly tie that assembly to what's going on here. I don't know, maybe playing around with the composition a little bit more. We are missing a title, and I know that you said that you were gonna maybe try some other things with these drawings. It is helpful to see this like rear view, but I do think there are some other notes that maybe could be added about like your color selection or maybe materials. So let's go on to one of these next ones. Thumbnails. For this one, let me see. Was this thumbnails of like Home Depot stuff? I'm not sure if it's exactly what I was looking for. I did want to see a bunch of objects that were already from a consistent like Home Depot brand. So outside of that, the shading style on each of these thumbnails, this top row thumbnails, is very efficient. It's communicating pretty well without going overboard. All right, let's take a look at what your other page was. Oh, okay, so this was the page with rigid tools. So that other page looks like maybe you were still exploring some other objects from your Home Depot set of items to go with a Happy Meal. A title and some notes would go a long way in explaining what it was you were looking at, I suppose. So these look great. I can see, you know, enough shadow to tell me that like these are round. These are relatively flat surfaces, but it also doesn't look super overworked, so nice job with that. I'm not seeing like an undersketch under these. Interesting choice for like the scribble shadow. It maybe looks just a little sloppy, but it's not super distracting, so it's cool to see that you're trying something there. Let's see, the highlights on top of this guy, oh, they wound up on the same layer as the pen, as the like your line work, In general, I try to keep my highlights underneath the line work so that the line work is really what's driving the sketch. At this kind of explanatory sketch level, usually that's a better way to go. You want your line work to kind of stay on top. Yeah. Again, title and some notes for calling out what it was you were looking at and noticing about, these color proportions, or that like the handles always seem to be one way, or these edge details are always chamfered, or something like that. So, all right, that was Laura. Who is next? Mitch. All right, looking at some studio. VBL exploration. So actually what I was looking for on this page was for you to draw these objects, to give yourself a chance to practice using some of the shading tools. It is nice to see your hierarchy of information here with the brand. You have a title. These are things that you could use as callouts and actually tie to some of these objects. But I don't really see any sketching on this page. So not quite was what I was looking for with this guy. Alright, so here are some ideas. Check the proportions of your canvas. Again, I'd like you guys to try and use 17 by 11 at 150 dpi, just so we're all kind of on the same page, and our tools all scale the same way. These are all, looks like thumbnails. I'm trying to remember what I asked each of you guys to do. I can go back and look, but I'm pretty sure I was asking for like composition pages. Anyway, if you were supposed to be doing like these thumbnail, like 3D thumbnail explorations, I'm happy to see these labels. That's great. Another way that you can tie a bunch of these like objects together in space is with a layer in the background. You can do a vignette behind all of them. Oh, never mind. So this is also, it looks like maybe you merged all your layers together. It'd be cool to see sort of how you structured your layers in this too, because then I could help you with that. So overall, there's an efficiency to this one that's kind of nice, and actually I can see that you're doing what I was asking. Nice color block, and then a simple way of applying shadow to one side and maybe a highlight to the other. That's great. I think you did lose some of your line work on these guys, or not that guy, on these guys, to try and bring that back. It is tougher to do, in my opinion, a lot of the thinking, like thumbnail thinking in the digital world, just because it's easy to get caught up in the tool. So let's take a look at your next page. And this one is big. Again, make sure your canvas size is the right size. All right, for a composition, I like that we're seeing sort of a hierarchy of information here. 1, 2, and 3. Again, like a title and the logo and stuff would be kind of nice up here. Hands for scale, those are great. Those are perfect. Actually, this view looks really good. Yeah, you can see exactly how these are supposed to be holding these things. It looks like maybe that's actually like a 3D model that was brought in or something. Who knows? That looks really good though. Same for this guy. Yeah. I do feel like I'm missing some of the notes that should be on this page. This view showing the context of how it's used in person. This one looks like it's communicating that there are magnets. You could probably even blow this up a little bit more and show like the tip of the object and like one of these worm things more up close and sort of show that this is like pluses and minuses that are really like attracting each other, and you could even label like magnetic attraction. This is showing like the context, this is sort of showing the hero view of the objects at a larger scale, and this is maybe your detail view. I think that might be a nice third view to include instead. Yeah, actually I don't really see any sketching on this guy. So I want you guys to have a chance to explore these tools a little bit, and so definitely got to get some practice in. All right, so who is next? No changes. Ty. All right, Ty. Double check your proportions on your canvas. I would like these to be 11 by 17, so 17 up here, 11 here, and 150 DPI. By default, I think it sets it to your like the proportions of your screen. So just double check. That way we're all working on the same size. It's a nice blend of number of pixels and something that can print without being too giant. So I can tell that maybe you did a duplication of this view and warped it down here. It's actually pretty efficient. Nice job with that. And I like that you've got the title for your page, a couple clean callouts. This shadow down here might be just a little too dark and distracting. You could probably even get away with just one of those simple faked in ellipse shadows and it'd be fine. The foot here for scale is great, and your method of shading looks cartoony in a really good way. It seems very efficient to me, so nice job with this page. Yeah, this is a great composition. This is a cool way to call out the title. Nice abstracted, like human scale here, showing your toy in context, in its application, and you also have scale and context with your hand here. This is a great set of views. You've got hand holding a toy that's halfway open and what it's like closed and inside. To show this inside view, you might actually show, I think this works, but you could also, see if I can, you could do something that's maybe a little bit more like a section view, as if you like crack this thing in half, and actually like hash out and you could even call it like section view, and maybe like shade in behind these guys a little bit more because it's like the inside of the egg. Again, it's being maybe a little bit nitpicky. In general, like that's an awesome set of views there. This is a great thing to call out. All in all, I think this is an awesome composition. So nice job with that. It would be cool to see a close-up of maybe one of these guys' faces, and you maybe could do that, like if this is the butt of one of them, you could show like the eyes on here. Just because, I don't know, it'd be cool to see that. But all in all, yeah, this is a really good composition. Nice job, Ty. And I don't think I got a third page from you. The page of existing objects using VBL seems to be missing. So see if you can find that for me. Okay. Next, we got Eunice. All right, Eunice, I think we looked at yours a little bit in class. Your size of your canvas looks good to me, so thanks for following those instructions. Rendering, well, let's see. In general, the composition looks great. I like that you've got a title on here, nice and called out. This vignette in the background helps tie everything together. Doesn't get in the way of your shadows. Those are nice. Let's see. So this is sort of like your full package. Yep, full package view, attachable legs, hammer tool. This, man, is just like screaming to have some little like call outs about this hammer, like screaming down and smashing this thing to bits. Like this could be so much more like smashy, smashy. It's rendered really well. That's like the one little piece of energy that I think is missing, knowing what this thing is supposed to be doing. It's cool that you're using some like colored lines as opposed to the black lines. Yeah, that's fine. Your line weight is definitely taking a back seat to some of the shading. In the sketching style that we were talking about, maybe the ideas aren't far enough along to warrant the amount of time that sometimes it takes to do like the softer shading and stuff. So see if you can, at this level of a concept, communicate the same amount of information with less effort spent on your shading. Sort of optimize your time that way. Your packaging is really cool too. For shiny packaging, one thing I like to do sometimes is you can use a nice soft brush like you were using, and then use a hard edge of an eraser to cut away. And it'll give you more of like a shiny package look. With that hard edge in there. Anyway, yeah, this is a nice page. What else do you have? Okay, detailed views of kind of the same thing. That's cool. Once again, I think you could make this like impact a little bit more the highlight of what's happening in the sketch. These shadows, especially because they're falling behind this object, can maybe be exaggerated a little bit more. I think as a whole, your shading is accurate, but I think you could maybe exaggerate like some of these areas, like this whole bottom face probably be just a little bit more dark, more dramatic. Show me a little more contrast between these parts. Make these items jump off the page a little bit more. And again, same rules about line work apply. I like that you're adding some line work to these, some line weight to these areas, because this is where our attention is supposed to be. But some of these other areas too, I think, could still benefit from some extra line work, or line weight, just to emphasize what's happening in those different places, like the outside of this cube, maybe the bottom edge needs a little more weight, just to make it feel a little bit more like a sketch. This is a crazy perspective. The bottom of this box, I think, is not quite right. You've got, yeah, your horizon line is like right here. So these would be, anyway, I don't want to get too nitpicky here. That's just like a really extreme perspective. I like that you're picking a perspective that's a little more more extreme, a little more dynamic. But you could probably, like, we lost this third leg back here. It might be nice to do a perspective that was more like, like you could put all of the bottom legs more on the same plane, and then you'd have a chance to see that back leg back here. That might be a different, maybe, I don't want to say better, but maybe a perspective that shows us a little bit more information. Or if you wanted to show this cube popping out, like maybe the cube is on the side that's more exposed, just give it a little bit more room. Anyway, you're doing really well. That's why I'm picking on some of these other things. All right, the last page that you did, Eunice, the VBL page. Drawing existing Muji. Okay, we got Muji again. Nice. Yep, palette. That's a good way to call it out. Nice use of brand. Yay. Geometric cube form. Neutral palette. Simple plastic forms. Soft cube. Muji is huge for the Squircle. And they actually have a really cool design theory behind where that appears at different scales of objects. So, yeah, this is fine. Again, we were just looking for like little details. Difference between neutral palettes. So, yeah, this is good. Nice job, Eunice. Okay. Who else do we have? We're getting close to the end. This video is super, super long. We got two more people. So we have Liam. Okay, what am I looking at, Liam? This is a concept for some kind of maybe a puzzle or something like that. I'm asking that question kind of rhetorically because it would be nice to have a title and maybe a brand to go with that title. And then definitely some call-outs about, like, oh, inner pieces do this, outer ones do this, material, like user, finger, to like pull apart or something. I just, some context for, some notes about what's actually happening here is kind of nice. These two views might be nice lined up right next to each other if you're showing a change, like an A to B kind of thing. Like if this happens first, this happens second, or the other way around, like line them up, because I'm not entirely sure what this arrow means. Also, your perspective here seems pretty orthographic, meaning it's not really converging very much. It's not a very dynamic perspective. You could probably find another view that will communicate the same way, like the same amount of information, but make it feel a little bit more dynamic. So maybe you could do one that's a little bit more like this thing sitting on the ground, and we're looking up at it a little bit more. Make it just feel a little bit more epic on the page. That's appropriate. Who knows? Okay, let's look at one of your other pages here. Page 2. Oh, this is a VBL page. Okay. Again, like a title and a brand would be helpful. I like that you're labeling chamfered edges. I know that you can type things in Sketchbook Pro. Try and resist that. Try and resist the urge to use the type tool for now, and instead work on your hand lettering. Mine is sloppy when I'm writing really quickly on this demo. These pages should look like a sketch still. That's one really important thing about Sketchbook Pro, is that you can still maintain the impression of a sketch. For the same reason, I can tell you're using these guides. You're using these guides to make straight lines. Maybe too much so. It's starting to look like, and you can tell me, I don't know, are you spending a lot of time trying to get all of these lines exactly perfect? I know that this is a tool that will let you do that, but I also know that you can end up spending a lot of time if you worry about getting your lines exactly perfect every single time with guides every single time too. So try and do more freehand in this tool. It'll give you a chance to get more line weight in certain areas, and it'll make it feel more like a hand sketch too. All right, let's see how your other page is. Also would have liked to see a few more objects sketched from Rhesus on this page here. Okay, let's pull this down. All right, same thing goes with this. I think, like I see all of these lines are exactly constructed with some sort of construction tool. You don't need to do that in this. So let me, I guess, maybe give you an example of another way to do it. So let's say I did an undersketch, and in general, I wound up with, I'm going to check your size here too. Hold on one sec. Image size. Yeah, do this at 150, not 300. It will help make all of your brushes not quite as ridiculously fine when you start drawing with them. I know printers print at 300 dpi. They also print very well at 150, especially when you're doing not photos, you're doing just sketches. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to scale my drawing back down and my pen a little bit. Okay, so in general, like let's say I have my undersketch kind of the way I want it. If these are straight lines, that's fine. I'm going to try and make them straight, but at the same time, this is a sketch, so I think it's okay to be a little bit off. And it might be interesting to get these to be instead of exactly straight on view, be somewhere just like slightly in between. Maybe that is the bottom line. Right, it's still supposed to be a sketch. You can still come back through and add some line weight to maybe like your bottom edge here to make that stand out. I'm not worried about this being like super precious. And yeah, like rounding some of these corners can help them feel like it's more I'd imagine the Happy Meal toil isn't going to have like knife sharp edges. Okay, so now we've got eyeballs. You can get those pretty close. And then your smile going across this is probably going to kind of break slightly. Okay, then blocking in color. So if this thing is white, it might make sense to do the background in like a gray color, so that then when I'm blocking in color, I can actually use white as a color. And it's going to make this object jump off the page a whole bunch more. And if I know I'm going to shade this stuff in, maybe I don't need to go the whole way. You've got red in general. even if I'm using like bright red, I like to try and back it off the brightest of bright just for a sketch. It helps it feel less like a Microsoft Paint, you know, computer color choice from the 90s. Okay, so I block off my color. Now I'm going to do a, you know, might as well fill in the rest of that white. Fine. For the way that I'm shading things here. Just block everything in all the way. If I need to, I can increase the size of my brush. Fill in the rest of this color. Wonderful. All right, see, it already looks more like a sketch. What's nice about that, not being like a technical rendering style, is that this still feels like it can change. Okay, so let's do, on a new layer, we're going to do some shading with like a light or medium gray on a multiply layer. And let's say my light is coming from this direction. So probably both these faces are going to be in shadow. And because this is a faceted object, I might break my rule about using just a single shade for these simple drawings, because this is such a important part of this particular object. To show that each of these is a strong facet. Right, I'm going to erase away on the outside. I might try and leave just a little bit of highlight on the edges here, just to keep it jumping off the background. Okay. I also probably want to add some shadow back to that middle gray to the sides of my shoes here. Use an eraser to fix up that boundary. And then if I want to do some highlights, I might be good. This might have enough for me, but I'm going to use a pure white on a new layer that is about, I don't know, 70 or so % opaque. And I'm going to draw in a little bead on each of the shoes. And I'm not going to add white highlights to a white surface, so I might be done there. I might add a little bit of highlight to, I don't know if those are supposed to be painted on, but I could add a little bit of highlight. I'm going to do a new layer, so it's completely white, to the edges of that eyeball, just to kind of show that it could be a a molded detail. Sure. Okay. One other thing I could add here underneath everything, underneath my color, everything else, I'll do a new layer with a dark gray that I might use as a drop shadow. So it looks like this object is standing on the ground somewhere, and that can help it pop off the page. So I wasn't spending a ton of time on everyone like this, but I wanted to kind of reel you back from, Liam, reel you back from being so stuck on the most rigid of rigid lines. I want you to still feel and treat this tool like it's a sketch tool, because that's important. Okay, so I think that was it for you. We're going to go on to the next, and I think the last person. Yeah. So Tessa is up. Jot down Liam, your head is done. Okay. Tessa, it looks like you were using a reference, which is great. That's another great thing about digital sketching, is you can actually bring a reference right into your page. Now let's see. We have an undersketch. I'm glad you did that. It looks like, and even if you like traced right over this, that is totally fine for a reference. If you know this is exactly the view you want to draw it from. Let's take a look at how this thing actually turned out. First thing, definitely want somewhere on the page like a title and maybe like the brand somewhere so we know what we're looking at. It would be nice to get some callouts on things like Home Depot orange. Handles tend to be black and grippy. I don't know, metallic surfaces on like metallic working surfaces or something like that. Give me some of those details that you're seeing when you're analyzing another brand's visual brand language. I know the white outline was something that a few people have been trying to really pop their image off the page. I don't think it's really necessary in this type of rendering. So let's give this another shot here. I'm going to turn off your color, and I'm going to try and do this really quick. I know it's late, we're running out of time. So I'm going to block in some color. Let's start with some gray. And first of all, I think some of your lines aren't quite following the perspective all the way. Like this line here seems a little bit off. Really still need to work on those lines even in Sketchbook Pro. I'm glad that you're not relying on like the guides to try and get those lines right. Just keep practicing. You'll get a feel for how the tools work. All right, so I can actually use an eyedropper tool to pull this orange color directly off of my reference so I can color in. Oops, let me just try again here. Try and get this kind of close. If I've overshot anything, I'm just going to use an eraser and get rid of those areas that I didn't want. And this is kind of a boring, you know, just like kindergarten, color by numbers or whatever, fill in color inside the lines task. It's fine. It looks like I missed. Oh, well, I guess you didn't get to drawing that thing up top there. We'll just skip it for now. One more color, this like nice khaki color, that's really cool. I'm starting a new layer, so I can just color everything else, that like awesome Home Depot khaki color. I actually really like that color. So once you fill this in, and really it doesn't take very long to fill everything in with just blocking it in with color. Yes, you can go through and add some black, like that is supposed to be silver, chrome, whatever. Let me go back in. I rarely use all the way full black for anything. Even if objects are supposed to be black, I'll use like this 7th shade of gray. That way I can still shade things darker. Alright, there's still a few things missing, but that's fine. I'm just going to add some of these in. And okay, so you block in your color. Step 1. I'm going to merge all my color layers together so they're all on the same page. Step 2, we're going to create a new layer, make it a multiply layer, pick like a nice medium or light gray, and start coloring in some shadows. Okay, where's our light coming from on this? Let's say it's coming mostly from the top and kind of from the front. So definitely anything inside of this is going to be in shadow. And we might come back through and even darken the shadow more. If I overshoot, remember I can always erase. Okay, probably this whole side and like underside here, just to communicate that it's on like a different surface. I'm going to make sure that this is all in shadow. And notice I'm drawing with gray, but because I'm using a multiply layer, it darkens the orange without making it like a gray orange. It's pretty cool. I'm going to add, again, I'm just sort of like thinking about which of these surfaces, based on my light source, are going to be in shadow. Going through each one of them, coloring them in, nice and flat, because in this explanatory sketch, where at this point in the design process we don't need to communicate a high level of detail, we're just trying to show an overall understanding of form, communication of form. We can kind of shade things in cartoony. And, okay, I'm going to probably use a darker gray and come back through and hit these areas like on the inside of this to show that they're like they're like behind these other surfaces. We're looking at like the inside of an object here. It's almost like a cast shadow. Okay. Next, I'm going to do some highlights. I'm going to use a white pen, or my white design brush, on a new layer that is, I'm going to turn down the opacity a little bit and just add some highlights to the top surfaces up here. I'm actually going to make a new layer and do the same thing for this other top surface, so I can just, oops, I'm erasing. So I can just color the whole darn thing and not have to worry about accidentally erasing stuff on the top surface that I already colored. Like that. Erase the parts I don't like. And maybe I'll put just like a little highlight on the top of this wheel to show that it's a shiny metallic wheel. Like that's it. That's kind of what I'm looking for here. Again, I think some of the line work perspective is off a little bit, and there's certainly some details missing that once added back in are really going to make this thing pop. I mean, like all these like details here, when I add them, they're going to really make this feel kind of 3D. And adding a contour line in here too is really going to help make those details look the way they're supposed to. So I think you just needed some more time on this, but that's kind of what I'm looking for here. One more thing you could add to help anchor this thing underneath all of your other layers is a nice big cast drop shadow to make this thing sit on the ground. Not off the page, but okay. Anyway, spend enough time on that. Let's open another one here from Tessa. Alright, now we're talking. This is some shading. Once again, I think we're missing a title and some callouts. Like, this is a detailed view of a chair for a Happy Meal or something like that. It would be great. I see that you're pulling some awesome details from those rigid tools, like these U-channels. Call that out. U-channels from rigid tools, chamfered edges, Home Depot orange color. You could even show really like this whole view. You could put in a circle and erase away all of the rest of this stuff, and then say this is how this comes together. That would be nice. I like that you're treating this tool like it's still a sketching tool. Like you're adding in some of these thicker line weights. That's good. I'm glad that you're still doing that. That's important. It does get maybe a little bit extreme here. Same rules apply. And I don't know if you did an undersketch in this one. Looks like maybe you did. Let me see if I can hide these things. Yeah. That's good. It'd be nice. I think you still just have a little bit more work to do on your perspective, making sure everything sort of fits inside that perspective. But hey, for a first try in this tool, I think you're off to a good start. Same thing with the color blocking and shading here too. like you blocked this in with orange, start a new layer. That's a multiply layer. Get a nice, darker brush. Pick which side your light's coming from, and then just start shading everything that's not that side. This darker color. It's really going to help make these things pop off the page and communicate quickly without burdening you with like doing a whole bunch of airbrushing work. Actually, all of that is going to be in shadow. And then you might have like a darker gray for this inside because it's all hidden. Like all of that is probably going to be darker. I'm just like going through this really quickly right now. Yeah, this back here might be darker too. And then you might have, I don't know, you might put in like what could be the cast shadow from that, just to fake it in and make it look. Anyway, that's kind of what I'm looking for in terms of like tune style shading. You can always lighten it up by changing the opacity of the layer. Okay, next, open, last one. Here we go. All right, same thing, Tessa. Add a title to your page somewhere. It might be nice to include the brand. Like if you have the title on here, find a nice spot for it. But put the brand, put the title on here somewhere. Yay! I like that you're adding these callouts, boxy chopped edges, half circle cutouts, like grips on tools. Perfect. That's exactly what I want to see. Put those on your other sketches as well, and then in your title, tell us what it is we're looking at here. So stickers for desk, that's a part of the Happy Meal toy. It might be nice to see that as one of these views. Like you can kind of see these details over here. This view might have been a good place to put like your actual Happy Meal box. I have no idea what those look like anymore. Put your box over here, or maybe like your box is opening or something. And we can see why these objects, like where those objects come from, what they're supposed to be used for. I would also really like to see a hand in here somewhere to show how these are supposed to be used. If these are stickers, it might be helpful to see like the sheet that they come on. And then you can even show one of these guys let me add a different layer here. Like one of these guys actually pulling off the page, with some fingers. We're seeing like the back side of the sticker here. That would be cool. That would show what it is you're trying to communicate. So, okay, I think that is pretty much a wrap for today. Thanks for no one hopefully sat through that whole thing. That took forever. Hopefully this is helpful for you guys to get some like one-on-one feedback, and we'll see you guys in class.